Kia ora te whānau o I hukaraiti ko Andrew Doubleday tēnei. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 29th of January 2023. The year has started in earnest, hasn't it? It's the Sermon on the Mount according to Matthew chapter 5 verses 1 through to 12, the beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Over the years I've seen many takes on the Sermon on the Mount. I've even offered one or two myself, I think. And even reviewing the different translators will demonstrate a variety of viewpoints. For example, the NRSV, which you just heard read, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." In the New Living Translation, which is one I've just been recently introduced to, "God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs." The Message, Eugene Peterson's take, "You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule." And Dallas Willard, who, as a commentator, I've really enjoyed over the years, in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, he puts it like this: "Blessed are the spiritual zeros, the spiritually bankrupt, deprived and deficient, the spiritual beggars, those without a wisp of religion, when the kingdom of the heavens comes upon them." As I said, everyone has a take on these beatitudes, these blessings, these sources of happiness. I want to suggest that in the 21st century, and probably throughout history, most people would dismiss each of these beatitudes as anything to be happy about. No, I don't think so. To suggest that these could be sources of joy is intensely counterintuitive. And surely that is the point. We imagine that it's the opposite of these beatitudes that will make us happy. Best example I can think of in my own life is one that's not listed here, but it serves as an illustration of what I'm trying to say, because it had quite a powerful effect on me. He could just as easily said, "Blessed are the celibate," and it's the issue of celibacy. I'm a normal red-blooded male. I discovered, though, that when I was making the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola, and this was over a decade ago for the first time, these spiritual exercises are the basis of spiritual formation for the Catholic Order of the Jesuits. When I was making these exercises, because that's how the Catholics describe it, I had such a profound sense of the love and presence of God. And I understood why it would be all that one needed and more than enough, to have such a sense of the presence of Jesus, of knowing the love and the grace and the accompanying journeying with Jesus. And anything less, including marriage, was simply a cheap imitation of an intimacy that we're invited into with God. It sounds kind of shocking, I know, yet many of us would imagine that being celibate required a huge sacrifice. But I discovered that this was not the case. That when you have such a sense of the love and the presence of God, as I said, marriage can seem more of a distraction. Now, this is not to say I don't wish to be married, because I am happily married. But what it does is that these beatitudes tend to turn our accepted understandings on their head. Blessed are the poor, and we'll just take it at the most basic understanding. We said, no, surely, happy are those who win lotto, or so we imagine. I remember listening some years ago to a couple of talkback hosts discussing this, and they were discussing a bit of research that had been done, and it suggested that there's one thing worse than not winning lotto, and that is winning it. That actually winning lotto, particularly large sums of money, tend to make people miserable. And one of the hosts says, well, he says that may be the case, but since there was a big draw coming up of 30 million, he says, I'd like the opportunity to be $30 million miserable, which I thought was really quite funny. But we don't realise, in fact, how ephemeral the buzz that we get from this windfall is, how quickly it dissipates, and how short a time the buzz lasts. And it seems to me, as I've thought about it, it's the pursuit of wealth where the energy for it is. We just imagine that it's going to make us happy. But Ecclesiastes reminds us, if we want to be wealthy, we can never get enough. And because so few of us realise this, because we don't experience it, we don't therefore believe that to be the case. We, at some level, think, if I just had, and we put a sum of money there, so many dollars, then I'd be happy. So we see the assertion, blessed, happy are the poor, as nonsense. They would be signs of losers. Each one of these beatitudes could be seen by the world out there as signs of a loser. Now, at the risk of offending those who love the man, I couldn't help thinking of Donald Trump coming down his golden escalator as the epitome of what I'm trying to talk about. The clearest example of the world's values. It would be inconceivable to him that any of these beatitudes would be anything he'd be wanting in his life. My hunch is that he'd be terrified of them and would take every possible measure to avoid any of them. Listen to them. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, the humble. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the poor in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. For many, these are all signs of weakness, of wimpiness, of opportunities to be trampled on. Who would want any of that? Yet, as Jesus speaks, he addresses the reality of most people's lives. This, in the context of those whom Jesus is speaking to, is how they experience life, of their struggles, of their uncertainties. In an age with a sharp divide between the haves and the have-nots, when prosperity was regarded as a sign of blessing, of the smile of God, and poverty as a sign of judgment, or at least the frown of God, where few people had the power and the resources. And for those coming to listen to Jesus, these words would have been a salving balm, a word of relief, a word of hope, of consolation, of life. Now, you may doubt me. I just want you to reflect for a moment then on the story of the rich young ruler. And what does Jesus say at the end of his encounter with this young man? How difficult, he says, it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And his hearers, his disciples, are absolutely shocked. And they ask, well, who then can be saved? Because the implication is that rich people are holy people, are blessed by God. And Jesus is saying it's not the case. So here we have words where struggle, where pain, where loss is validated. God is present in these experiences, even though you may not feel it. And for these people who are hearing, it comes as a huge relief. Blessed are the poor. Wow, what a relief. You mean it's not a curse? No, you'll know your need of God. Blessed are those who mourn. You mean I have permission to grieve my loss and not feel guilty for it? That I'm in some way responsible or lack faith? Of course not. God grieves with you, knows the meaning of suffering. You're not alone. Blessed are the meek, the humble, the one who thinks less of themselves than is true of how God sees them. They can be trusted with stewardship of what's important because they won't get big-headed and beyond themselves. Remember what he says? They will inherit the earth. It's about stewardship. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those aware of their own failings and longing to be better, not glorying in their own self-righteousness, their own holier-than-thou-ness, but aware of their need of grace, because God ultimately assures them of his love. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Well, what more needs to be said? Blessed are the pure in heart, the simple, the guileless, those who refuse to judge others, who see and believe the best. What a gift, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, those who work for restoration, for reconciliation, surely agents of the gospel, the ministry of reconciliation given to us as Paul describes it, with others, reconciled with others, with God, reconciled with ourselves, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. People prepared to stand up for the right things, to do the right things at personal cost, will stand for the oppressed, the weak, the most vulnerable. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. I want to suggest that the operative word here is falsely. We may imagine that we are being persecuted for Jesus, when in fact we're standing for cultural values that are antithetical to the way of Jesus and the gospel. That happens a lot. We can see it in our political scene at the moment, both here and overseas. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Who persecuted them? Who persecuted the prophets? Actually, it was the most religious people. Who persecuted Jesus? The most religious people. We as followers of Jesus need to be careful that we are not the persecutors. Jesus invites us into a counterintuitive, counter-cultural engagement with the world, where things are not as they most obviously might seem. It's worth reflecting on. While where we may be trapped by the world's values and ways of seeing and think they're the ways of Jesus. Anyway, enough for now. God bless you.